Morning. How is everyone?
Morning, Mark. All right.
Morning.
That
Morning,
was
everybody.
professional, that, wasn't it?
The coffee. Oh, there's my boy. Broadcasting to the
Morning.
nation, dressed only in a Mr. Man duvet.
Must have blown the budget on that intro there, Mark.
Yes. Yeah. It's what you have when you've got friends who know some things. So.
Yeah. How you feeling? I've had some really positive feedback on last week's edition, so that's good.
It was good, and we've had quite a number of people who viewed it since then, and a few people who watching. I noticed somebody from India was posting out what time it was going out today on India.
Nice.
So hopefully there are people from abroad that are watching, and hopefully it can be some news to people all over the world, not just in the UK.
Are you back tomorrow, Ed?
Well, back with key workers and vulnerable children, but we've pushed back opening wider than that, at least for a week, because you know what, you can have all the protocols you like, but if the parents, the pupils and the staff aren't 100% confident to run them yet, you're better off putting it back. So that was my argument. I said, look, I know that we've written a great risk assessment, and I think we can manage this safely, particularly in Oxford, where the infection rate is well down. We're down to something like 0.44 here. So it's right that we should open, I think. Yeah. But not if people aren't ready. And we haven't had a chance to prepare the kids or to prepare the staff. So I'm saying we'll leave it a week and do it safely rather than rush it on the Monday. Yeah. You the same? Are you back in?
Yeah, I'm back in. You, Mark?
I'm back in as well, yes. So we had to go in on Friday just to go through our risk assessments and make sure everything was in order and get the classrooms ready. So, be wondering tomorrow how many will actually turn up, whether we'll have all full complement or whether we'll just have some. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. Have you got a picture on that?
No.
About you, Graham, have you got a clear idea how many people you're actually expecting?
I mean, we've got quite a lot coming back, to be fair, and but I mean, it is a bit sad when I trawled through Twitter this morning and looked at, we've had enough people, journalists, etc., having a go at teachers this year or during this time, and when you see that, other teachers are having a go at other teachers because they're going into school and they're having a go at senior leaders and things like that. It makes me a bit sad, really, because I think, it's a difficult time. They've been left in an almost impossible situation. Each teacher knows, or each head, senior leadership team, they know their school best. They know the area. They know the kids. They're not going to do anything that's not safe, are they? They're not going to put people in danger. I think we need to, this time more than any, we need to stick together, don't we?
We really do. But, we see it every time, don't we, Graham? And if you've been playing around on Twitter for long enough, you see that bit of human character writ large, which is when people get nervous, they get nasty.
Yeah, true.
And so you've got a lot of people who are very scared. A lot of people are very anxious at the moment. And that's, and for a lot of those people, Twitter's like a bit of a safe place for them. So I can't really talk to maybe my colleagues or my head. Maybe I don't feel confident to do that, but I can say it on the Twitters. And so if I'm feeling a bit anxious, I end up actually not really helping, because it doesn't make you feel anybody feel better at the end of the day. I just look at that. I say, oh, look at all these anxious people, and they're sniping at each other and trying to take each other down and making each other upset. And I go, well, it's completely counterproductive, but it's not actually coming out of malice. It's coming out of fear. If your school's got great management for the system, then you'd like to think that we've sorted out every risk and we're doing it as safely as we can. We can have people coming back. We can allay their fears, but people's fears aren't rational. People's fears, are not allayed by a written risk assessment. And I think that first Monday morning back, when people are thinking about that, the parents are feeling that, the kids are feeling that. You're sure as hell feeling that in that classroom. And you've got to be very intentional and very mindful about how you present yourself, whether you're a senior leader at the gate welcoming people back and sending them down the weird chicane of traffic cones, or whether you're the teacher trying to welcome children into the classroom in a way that feels authentic, but still directing them straight to that desk where they're going to spend the next how long. How do you do that in a way that feels genuine, even when you are actually nervous? You are scared. And you can't easy. The parents are doing a good job on that, because they're scared too. Yeah, they don't want to send their kids back, but they're trying to get back to work. They're trying to.
We're going to have to be great actors, aren't we?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we do that, don't we? Teachers, we do that a lot. We are great actors and great presenters. The question is how you do that and retain your authenticity. If you can put the face on, put the talk on, and still remain authentic to yourself and your values, then you've cracked being a decent teacher, I think.
Yeah.
And there will be things that happen that we won't have even planned for, that we, during this first week back. And you'll think, oh my God, why didn't we think of that? Or this
100%.
hasn't worked, or that hasn't worked. And might be good to look at that next week. Do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be useful, possibly, for those that have experienced it, what they've learned, to share that, and then learn, or what we can learn from it as well. I think the numbers will grow as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think one day you might have a few, and the next day a few more, maybe. And no doubt there'll be people walking past the school gates, having a look in, trying to see what's it like, what's happening, and see whether they can work out. Or children going home and being asked, "What did you do today? How's it been?"
Yeah.
So it will change.
It will.
I can see we've got Bryn waiting here, ready for
bring him in.
So
Bryn.
Here we go. Hello, Bryn.
Hey, there he is.
Hello, everyone.
How are you, Bryn? Cheers.
Looking well, Bryn. To be fair, looking well.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, Ed, I recognise that hairstyle and the boy in the background from Camp Ed last year.
Oh, yes.
This time last year that we last hooked up. So,
yeah.
Really?
It was, and he was a lot smaller then. He's about double the size now that he was this time last year, my little boy.
I think we've all piled on the pounds over the last
year.
So.
Yeah, I'm sorry we missed Camp Ed this year. That was my first year last year. I had such a lovely time meeting all those brilliant people, and I can't do it this year. So next year we're going to have to make it an absolute hoolie, I think.
Definitely. I'm thinking the last time that I saw Mark was at the Bet Show at the Teach Meet there. So it's great that you guys are continuing the Teach Meet theme through BrewEd and everything else. What you've done over the past 10 weeks has been awesome in terms of keeping that positivity going, that kindness going. So thank you from myself and other teachers, other school leaders, and other people who aren't necessarily still teachers, but are there working with schools to support them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've enjoyed it, haven't we?
Now
it's been good fun.
It's been good fun, but it's been very good for my soul to carry on making connections. It could have been a very sad time for me. With BrewEd finishing, instead of feeling isolated, I feel more in contact with more people than ever. So, so it's Graham, really. Graham, with the big Saturday events, that's very much your doing. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'd be bored otherwise. So
You haven't been bored, have you?
No, I haven't been bored at all. No.
Well, one of the things that I know some people will be concerned about is about being physically active. I know that's more of your expertise, Bryn, as well, about how we can be physically active, yet at the same time maintain what we've been asked to do with social distance.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said the word physical activity there and not physical education. We've already referenced the fact that online there's been quite a lot of fallouts recently on Twitter. And I think Joe Wicks came in for a lot of criticism there in terms of being the nation's PE teacher. And I can understand why some people were saying, like, he shouldn't be making those claims. But you know what? He created a positivity and an energy. And he did get children and families out of their chairs, off their sofas, and they were physically active. So no, it wasn't PE. It was more physical training. But, I think he did a cracking job there. So respect to Joe for that. In terms of how we continue the lockdown situation, I've been watching so many videos created by teachers or coaching organizations with kids in backyards doing different physical activities, whether or not it's jumping over socks or throwing up rolled up socks or whatever. Socks are a lot in these videos. I'm not sure why, but it's a case of physical activity. I think people have realized that it's more important than it was in the past. Maybe it's just my Twitter feed and the algorithms, but I seem to be seeing far more positivity about physical activity and well-being than ever before.
It's such a good thing in order to keep yourself mentally aware and active, isn't it? Just actually being outside and being able to do something. It does keep you more focused and actually gives you a bit more energy to do and look at life in a positive way, I think.
Mm.
Do you think maybe, Bryn, before lockdown, we took it for granted? The whole, we can go out and we can exercise when we like, but during lockdown we couldn't do that. So people have, prioritized things a bit different, maybe.
Yeah, I think it depends on the school, obviously. I mean, one of the reasons why I left teaching and leadership in the first place was the fact that I was hacked off by the fact that many schools were going down a narrow curriculum of English and maths and English. But I think people are beginning to realize it's not just about testing. And Nick Gibb the other day was talking about the fact that, the testing there wasn't about the children, it was about the schools. And maybe now we're beginning to realize that, we shouldn't be prioritizing those two subjects and looking at the broader picture, the bigger picture about physical and emotional well-being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is something, isn't it? Because it is more than just two areas of the curriculum that we have to focus on.
Yeah.
That we do have to actually think about how we keep people well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with more of them returning to school, we think probably over the next few weeks, and a lot of schools' risk assessments involving children sitting at tables for extended periods, more than they'd usually ask them to. You got, talk about a gap widening. You've got a kid at home who's taking brain breaks every 20 minutes and going outside to bounce on the trampoline and then making sure they get on the river or where I live. And on the other side, you've got some kids stuck indoors for hours at a time. And they're told they can't sing in class, which is, to me, that's a form of physical activity. It gets our lungs working. It gets our core engaged, doesn't it? You're not even allowed to do that in the classroom. So how are we going to build in activity that keeps circulation going, keeps the core engaged? That's really hard. If you've got kids in class for how long? For an 8-hour day?
Yeah, I must admit, in terms of when you're in the classroom, I remember like 2 years ago, as a member of the NAHT, I was allowed to do a motion proposal, and it was a co-proposal with Ian Holmes from Thorner Primary School. He was poorly on the day, so it was Simon Smith who jumped into the breach and did the seconding. So at this event, we had 9 out of 10 head teachers saying that they would signpost their members towards move and learn activities. With 2 reports in the press. One of them was in the Independent, and it was gorgeous, and the other one was in the Telegraph, and it was let them run around the classrooms, head teachers urged. And I'm thinking, I never said that. Simon, did he say that? Did Ian say that? Nobody, we didn't say that, but that's the way that certain newspaper decided to share that. So like the naive fool that I am, I went online and read the online comments. So according to 20 people, I am an idiot, insane, the man who's the epitome of everything that's wrong with the education system, and a man with a book to sell. Well, obviously there's no book yet. But it was a case of like, we never once said that there are moments when we can move and learn in the classroom. For example, BBC Super Movers, and I've got to big them up because their content during the past 5-6 weeks, not just Super Movers, but the BBC bite-sized stuff has been pretty impressive, considering the fact that they've been working remotely and the studio facilities have been next to nothing, but they have been incredible in terms of that range of provision from, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 and beyond, and all those subjects, not just English and maths, but computing and geography, and it's been incredible. So getting back to what I should have been talking about, which was physical activity and physical education. I think before lockdown, a lot of schools saw the Daily Mile as the answer. That was, the silver bullet that would get children to be physically active. And that, I get it, but it won't work for all children. It will turn certain children off physical activity, the fact that they have to run for a mile or a kilometre every day at a certain prescribed time. So I would say when schools do go back, be cautious of that approach because it's worked for certain children, but not for everybody. And I would say you can mix and match it up, or mix and match. I'm not used to talking to screens and so much time writing. What I would say is that if you're working with your bubble and you create a philosophy for children question, right, guys, is it ever all right to steal? So that's the question. And as they run around the playground, keeping their 2 meters or whatever, they have this conversation at a distance, and they talk about, well, stealing's wrong, but maybe there might be a time when you might have to steal if the family was, starving or whatever. And then they get back and they sit down, keeping social distance again. But then you talk about what they thought as they were running, or they could run around and chant their times tables during the daily mile or whatever. So there are ways around it so that we're not doing a one-size-fits-all approach. And this is where teachers are awesome in terms of their creativity. They'll be able to see an idea online and think, right, I can tweak that, I can magpie that, I can adjust it so that it benefits my children in the situation that I'm in a particular moment. Yeah. And whether or not it's grid learning or whatever, so there's been a lot of talk about there were those scary images of the children sat in a playground in France, I think it was, in their own demarcated, chalked battery hen scenario there. And if you are going to go down that route, well, think about things that you could do within that grid method, whether or not each child has their own skipping rope and they do some skipping. So you have some children running around the outside of the playground. You've got some children skipping in their little grid zones. And then those things that you can work on so that the children aren't challenging each other, they're challenging themselves. So there's an organization called Evolve, and they put health mentors into schools. And they had a gorgeous system years ago called Personal Best My Effort, PBE. So your children can record how many hops, jumps, skips they did on one day, and then go back to it, say 2 or 3 days further down the line, and see if they've bettered that score. So you've got this inbuilt reward system. Can you beat your previous record? So there's so many opportunities out there, not just running around the outside of the playground.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I can see we've got Abby waiting, so I'm going to ask Abby to come and join in because I know she was. Hello, Abby.
Oh,
Abby.
There she is.
Hello.
Hello.
And we picked up that you'd actually produced some ideas and resources for teachers to use to actually use in the classroom or outside to be physically active. I don't know, you've been listening along to what Bryn said. Have you got anything that you would like to add to what Bryn has said about how to make it more for everybody?
So very much trying to stick to the national curriculum as much as possible. So usually in summertime, you're looking at your athletic sports, maybe your cricket. However, the whole situation with cricket is probably not ideal because the amount of skills involved, including the batting, the fielding, is probably not good ideal because obviously children sharing equipment. So very much the pack that I created is based on athletics. So looking at children sprinting, long jump, hurdles, very limited contact with equipment. And again, that makes it very easier for teachers who aren't potentially confident in PE to deliver it. And again, not have to worry too much about the hygiene side of it and having to wipe down equipment.
Because that's something I know in my own setting that we've all been given some of the PE store equipment's been shared out to each pod. So you're almost limiting to like, what can I do with 2 hoops and a ball and a skipping rope? And it's thinking about what you've got, and what you actually can do with that.
I think we did.
Yeah, so you can probably still
carry on, Abby. Sorry.
Sorry. So you can probably stick with the idea again, like you said, using a skipping rope, using variations. Again, each child has their own PE pencil case you can refer it to, so they know that their PE equipment is theirs and theirs only. Again, make sure you're constantly referring to those guidelines, and then children can again look to develop those skills with a skipping rope. Again, some people in sports day use skipping as theirs, so it's a good way again to develop the children's individual skills and again keep them engaged.
Yeah, I'm just thinking off here on the top of my head of having a stick of chalk and taking the chalk out and actually marking things on the playground, almost like a virtual obstacle course that you could actually try and do.
And I think in the classroom, maybe your children could actually utilize that creativity in terms of giving them a purpose. So, right, guys, we want to create an obstacle course or a route for the other bubble. So these children like design their challenges in the classroom and then take them outside and challenge the other children in their other bubbles. Because I think, the children come up with the best ideas. I know teachers are pretty cool, but children, they come up with ideas that are bonkers but beautiful. They work. Yeah. You mentioned before about risk assessment.
Yeah, I like that idea. Because children lead of it.
Oh yeah, I'm like, children are probably the most underused resource in school. When I'm working with schools, I tend to work with the children in year 6 to 5 first, and they become the move and learn champions during the course of the day. And those children, they're the ones that have the best ideas, and they take the learning to the next level. So long as teachers are prepared to give them that freedom and that trust that they will create something that's beautiful. The best ideas, and they took the learning to the next level. So long as teachers are prepared to give them that freedom and that trust that they will create something that's ideas, and they took the learning to the next.
Got a bit of delay there, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm noticing that
It's really crackly.
Yeah, Ed's put up a question about. Ben has put up a question. What's the deal with footballs? Can they be used to pass to each other or not?
Do you want to take a lead on that, Abby?
Do we know? Is it something that we can do?
Okay, I would say the best thing to look at is AFPE. So AFPE is the Association for PE. They did a webinar last week or the week before and then published some guidelines. So it's not necessarily a detailed risk assessment. It's for the schools to use as a template. That would certainly be worth looking at. I would say passing a ball, you'd have to look at your own school risk assessment, as Ed quite rightly said. Look at your R numbers as well, in terms of if you've got a low score, say down in Oxfordshire of 0.44, I think he said it was, maybe look at that, but I certainly wouldn't look at it in a school that's got an R number of approaching 1 at the moment, or maybe beyond.
A lot are worse, yeah. I mean, if you look at the day-to-day, which you can do online, you can look at what's going on in your area, and the picture across the UK is hugely varied. So there are places which, like Oxfordshire, are very, very low, and there's places where the numbers are still very high, well above 1. There's places where it's, the northern coast of Northern Ireland has got something, I can't remember, and I won't put a number out which will end up being wrong, but it was really quite alarming. And if those schools aren't maybe aware of that, because it's not being publicised in my local press, I don't know about yours, but the local radio and the local papers are not reporting daily R numbers, then I would be hugely more cautious about a football in those areas than I have to be here in Oxford, I think. I think it needs daily care, daily attention to this, because as more people are moving around the country, which they are, we've seen the pictures from Lulworth Cove, for example, people will be, I think the picture's going to change really quickly and we're going to have to be on top of it. So, I think, tomorrow in my school, they're going to play with a football. They're just going to, that's a fight I'm not going to have. Yeah. But if the picture changes, the fights I'm prepared to have will change.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting when the Premier League go back as well. And obviously there's no crowds there, but children are going to see players running around, passing the ball, tackling each other, and they're going to want to replicate that. That's what children do. Boys, girls, they want to emulate their heroes, their role models, and they will see that on television. And I think that's going to be something that schools need to be prepared for in a couple of weeks' time.
So in your classroom, for example, if you know that the boys in your class like to do great big goal celebrations, which involve cuddling in a pile on the floor, which a lot of them do, you might want to talk about that before they go out to play and say, what's your socially distanced goal celebration going to be? What are you going to do? It's that sort of attention to detail, actually, because when the children are excited, that's when they're going to forget any rules that they're finding easy to keep in the classroom. Yeah. So what do you do in this situation? And let's make a celebration out of it rather than a scary thing out of it.
Yeah, and the children create their own social distancing celebrations, their own physical distancing celebrations. How can you do it? A virtual high five over 2 meters, or there's so many options that we can come up with.
almost like a dance move that they have to perform.
I just think that it's all.
Sorry,
I just think like with the children, they still need to have the whole focus of having fun and enjoy doing what they're doing. As long as they're following the guidelines, that to know obviously again how to move in situations in the whole football side. If they are obviously scoring goals, they need to make sure that they also have that correct conduct with it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, you know, maybe things that look like games of football are likely to be difficult to manage, but there are other games you can play using a football, which you would be able to manage. But while I make that argument, I find the boys I teach, particularly in years 5 and 6, they think it's not football if it's not football.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to manage.
There's so many things we can do. We referenced the Daily Mile with a twist, but in terms of like just slowing things down as well with orienteering activities. I know some schools do have access to forest schools, but we could easily create orienteering type routes around the school when it's safe to do so, obviously, with children moving purposefully from one station to the next. And keeping that social and physical distancing. So there are so many opportunities there. And like teachers have always done this. We've always prepared ahead, but we've always responded to situations on the ground. And we're continually giving the risk assessments in our heads. We're continually tweaking and adjusting because that's what we are. We're teachers and parents as well.
Yeah. It's that dynamic risk assessment, isn't it? That you're always... It's always something I remember from being taught swimming. You count them in and you count them out. You're always doing that, always on the go, watching and seeing and responding. So,
Mark, Ruth had an interesting question about the Golden Mile.
Yes, I'll bring that back up. Yeah, there we go. Ruth, not sure about the Daily Mile. Heavy breathing, plus I would need them to be staggered. Yeah. I don't know what the guidance is as to when you are doing any physical activity, about droplets and how far they travel. Is it something we should be thinking? Is it 2 meters? Should we keep them more, less?
Yeah, if we're running, then our the area around us that we're breathing into is much larger. There was a lovely animation I saw of that showed, you know, if you're walking, you know, if you're standing still, it's 2 meters. You start walking, it's getting, you know, it's just a trail of it behind it. So I think it's all about looking at risk to benefit. You can make it 100% safe by keeping everybody at home. Yeah. As soon as you stop keeping them at home, okay, you've introduced some risk. Do you want them to be happy? I do want them to be happy. Do I want them to have some physical activity in the day? I think I have to, otherwise they will go insane, and, you know, and it's not good for them. So whatever we do in terms of physical activity, we're introducing risk, aren't we? If I get them to stand up in their places and do some stretches and get their muscles moving and engage their core a bit, I'm introducing a little bit of risk, but I think there's a strong benefit. At the end of the day, you know, there's going to be some fallout here because they're, you know, if somebody in your classroom takes the virus home to someone else, is there some responsibility for you there? I don't know, but I think any little bit of activity we do introduces risk, just as returning children to the classroom introduces risk. But if you think the benefit is strong, for lots of my children, they will not cope with sitting down for an hour. I am going to have to get them to stand up and do some stretches. I'll try not to do anything aerobic because that would be a bad idea, but they've got to engage their muscles, otherwise their concentration is going to go out the window. Yeah. You know, so especially I think,
you know, especially after being at home for 10 weeks as well.
But lots of them at home have been very active, remember. I mean, lots of them have got out of the habit of sitting down and are now running up and down the garden path. I mean, lots of them aren't. That's true. Lots of the kids I teach have been stuck in the flat above the shop with their 5 siblings. And they have become very sedentary. And again, I need them back in school and I need to get some activity back in them for the sake of their physical health. You know, it's not about PE. It's about life chances, you know. But there are other kids who I know have thrived at home, have really thrived because they've been able to go for a run around the garden, come back, sit down. Some activities end up taking 2.5 hours. Some activities only take 20 minutes. It doesn't feel like school. They're not used to that rhythm anymore. It's an artificial rhythm that we only have because that's how you manage children in a building, you know. So reintroducing them to school, part of that will be reintroducing the discipline of we sit down for this long. And it's not fair to expect that they can all do that on day one, because they've been not doing it since, when was it? Mid-March.
Mid-March, yeah.
I
can see we've got Ryan here. I'm going to join Ryan. Morning, Ryan.
Morning, everybody. How are we doing?
We're fine, thank you. And you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Yeah. I don't know if you've been following along with the discussion.
When was?
I certainly have.
Yeah. So just talking about the fact that some children have been active in the last 10 weeks and some children haven't been active, and trying to balance that, I suppose, get some children back into a way of how schools operate and how to become more active again.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I think one thing's for sure, I think Ed hit the nail on the head. There's so many children who have either not been active and done nothing, and then there'll be children who've probably taken it to the next level over this period of time. Whether that's been sparked by Joe Wicks or not, who knows? It could have been. But they've taken it to the next level. They're busy, they're active. And I think a point one of you raised earlier was about we almost, before this happened, took for granted the fact we could be as physically active as we could be, which maybe led to people not being as active as they should have been. Whereas now, when you have the powers that be and the government saying you can go out for that 1 hour initially, all of a sudden it becomes like, it's like dangling a carrot. It's like, don't touch that biscuit until I get back. Well, actually, now if you get a tiny little taste of it, you want to do it more. And I think it really will have inspired many people to be more active, which is good. And I think we then need to try and follow that up in this school setting. And I know it's going to be tough with the social distancing, but Bryn's raised some great points. Orienteering type activities, the personal best stuff, it is golden. It's brilliant. And for me, the way that I would approach doing that is I would look to do personal best type challenges that involve gamifying it and gamification, which gives the children a chance to be leveling up their performance, to pick and choose their challenge and their level with little skill sheets. And that's often the way I would approach PE in a regular setting anyway. It's not too much different, but bearing in mind that social distancing rule. I really like the concept of having these individual personalized bags of equipment, which might be simply a beanbag and a hoop and maybe a rubber kite, and either giving the children a chance to create their own activities and games others can replicate, or similarly, a bit of a bandwagon I've been on recently is the thought of a concept called physical scribbling, whereas many of these children won't have access to equipment at home, none whatsoever. For them, a kite, a bib, and a beanbag is like the best thing ever. And to give them a chance to express themselves in terms of movement and what can you show me with that equipment, and be creative, make your own stuff up. Because children down in early years do this when they're mark making with a pen, pencil in sand, and that's their way to express their meaning, how they feel in the world. Let's transfer that physically. What does your physical scribbling look like? What can you do to enjoy yourself with that and be active and have fun? And that's what I'd see looking at it as. And I think as long as you adhere to those AFP guidelines and you're making sure that you are cleaning equipment after use, if indeed it needs to be used by another bubble of students, then I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, are those guidelines easily accessible and fine for people?
Yeah. If you go on AFP website, Association for PE, you'll see it probably on the front page there, because it was a recent publication this week off the back of a webinar they delivered. They posted and published, and it's a very easy to access PDF document, and it talks you through risk assessing and the planning and things to consider in terms of the learning, things like changing. So they recommend, if and where possible, don't have them change into kits, get them to come to school in PE kits. You've got schools doing this already, and it makes sense for their PE days and PE mornings. Water Primary in Lancashire do it with Chris Willen. Come to school in your PE kit. That reduces that risk then of the changing times where there could well be contact and changing of clothes. So yeah, you go on AFP website and you'll see it all there.
Yeah, I looked at that AFP guidance, Ryan, and the webinar was brilliant. I mean, I've watched so many webinars recently. And what I did was I took their guidance and created an editable Google Doc. So I'll put that online later on, and then schools can access that and then edit it so that it's relevant to their particular school in their setting.
Yeah. Thank you, Bryn. Because I know, Graham, you've got a I'm just going to see if I can share this in a second. You've created the Padlets, haven't you?
Yeah, from last
so
week.
Again, from last week. So again, if there's any other ideas there that can be added to that,
by all
that
means.
would be great, because that will be somewhere. It is. There's quite a lot of things there. I know I've been looking at it and taking some good ideas from there. So yes.
And we can get that AFP guidance on the Padlet, can't we, Graham? We can get.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah,
find it there easily. I've popped the link in the comments at the side. Anybody who's watching can get it there. But we'll also retweet that link to the Padlet a few times.
Yeah.
Someone asked as well, Ed, about how we get the R number for our region. Could you tweet that out?
Yeah, I have tweeted that. So I have, and I actually tried to put the link to a thread we were having yesterday about that in the comments. It hasn't showed up, so I'll try that again. But the information is published in a rather almost not a very accessible form by the government. So the information is there from the government. There's a very, very clever website which is grabbing that information and turning it into graphical interfaces, which is good. So I've retweeted that, and I'll retweet it again, I think, at the end of this session, so people can see it. It's kind of, it doesn't change much about what you can do personally, but it might change your opinion about how you're looking at things. I think actually for school leaders, if they see that information, then some of their decision making gets a little bit clearer.
Yeah.
I've also picked up a question here about swimming. And, can you have a school swimming pool open? My thoughts on that was that's not possible with social distancing. Is that right?
I'll jump in. I don't know for certain. I'm not going to give you a definitive answer. But with what I've been reading, and if it was down to me, I certainly wouldn't at this point. It's not something I would do. Certainly while we're still playing around with the idea of what it looks like in a school, I personally wouldn't be willing to then take children to a swimming pool in which they're going to have faces in the water and all. And for me, I would still hang fire with that. 100%. Yeah.
I agree. I'll tell you what, though, I've never seen so many people swimming in the river as I have these last few days. Honestly, it's like what's that painting on the banks of the Seine? It's thousands of people swimming in the river, and I'm like, well, this is kind of good, because I always thought it was underused resource here in Oxford. We've got a beautiful river and handy swimming places, but like, my word, I've never seen the river so busy. It's like a festival down there. So I'm normally swimming in the river every day this time of year, and I've not been going because it's too damn crowded.
Yeah. It's like the beaches. Everybody's out on the beaches going.
These are people who would, in a normal year, they'd be, I don't know where they'd be. Maybe they'd be up at the swimming pool, but I don't think so. I think they're like, oh, what can we do? Let's go down a river with the other 7,000 people.
We're also going to need that space at the swimming pool to make sure they're social distance, and in the change rooms as well. It's quite difficult to kind of manage them coming out in a public place.
Yeah, I reckon the chlorine probably might kill the virus, but the changing room is a nightmare.
No.
Yeah. In terms of taking the learning outside, a lot of teachers might feel a little bit reluctant. And I know sometimes people see PE as, I don't know, there are barriers to doing PE. And we've become a little bit reliant on certain organizations providing coaches coming into school. So the teachers haven't been upskilled in the way that they could have been. I'd reference a book by Juliet Robertson. She's part of the independent thinking group. And she's got a book called Dirty Teaching. And I just put it onto the Kindle 2 weeks ago. And it's absolutely gorgeous in terms of how to reassure teachers that learning can be taken outside quickly, easily, but with a little bit of careful thought. And it's just absolutely the go-to book, I think, in terms of for the next few weeks as we look towards learning in different ways. Look at that book by Juliet Robertson called Dirty Teaching. So I'll put the link onto it later on the tablet. On the tablet.
Yeah, please do. Is that the book there? Dirty Teaching?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's on Crown House.
Crown House, right. Well, I say we'll add that to the the Padlet as well. That would be great. So, just keeping it an eye. Thank you for the book recommendation. There, that's come through. So,
if we're recommending things, on Graham's Padlet, you'll find a brilliant document that's put together by our friend Nicole, where she basically crowdsourced from Twitter many activities which children can play. So she's thinking about playtimes more than thinking about PE lessons, but activities they can do that would be socially distanced. So if you're struggling for things, I reckon that first morning back before the first playtime, one thing you'll be talking about is now, when we go outside, what can we do that's really safe to do? If you're a bit anxious about it, what can you do? So having a look through Nicole's document, you'll be able to pick out a few activities that you'll know the children will enjoy, and you can teach those safely before the kids go out to play. So that's a big up for Nicole. Thank you for doing that, Nicole. And you'll find it, if you can't find it any other way, looking on Graham's Padlet, you'll find it there.
Yeah.
Abby, what was it that you created?
Hello. I don't know if Abby can hear us.
Abby,
sorry, I'm really struggling to hear. It's all crackly my end.
Is it?
All right.
Abby, what did you create?
So, in terms of resources for teaching time?
Yeah.
So I've created knowledge organisers, and they're really good to help teachers with their understanding, and especially children. So these knowledge organisers basically explain key words and vocabulary that children are expected to learn during the topical unit throughout the scheme of work. And it also includes what children should be taught, which is in line with the national curriculum. And this is really useful, again, for all staff who potentially aren't confident in the delivery of PE to follow, and also a good way for people to self-assess themselves, so they can also look at the organisers and think, oh, do I know this word or vocabulary? And they can refer to that in their learning as well.
Where can we find this, Abby?
So I currently have this on my Twitter. So if anybody does want access to it, they can go onto my Twitter and give a comment, and I'll get in contact to send them over a copy. I'm in the process of trying to create my own website, but to create all my resources, but that's going to take some time to process at the moment.
Well, that'd be good. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Ryan, have you got any other ideas or get to resources that we could take from?
Well, for me at the minute, when we go back, we're not going to be teaching curriculum PE as we know it anyway. It's just simply not going to happen. We're not going to be teaching units, or we're not going to be teaching sports. I put something out on Twitter yesterday, which I actually made a couple of years ago. I called it the umbrella method. I made it as like a fundamental locomotor skills intervention gamification sheet, taking you through catching, jumping, kicking, and a bit of agility, which is essentially levels that students can work through. And if they've achieved that level, they can tick it. And then the teacher, if they see it, they can tick it off as well. And if you go on peumbrella.com under the free resources section, most of the resources I've created on there are aimed at gamified. It's where it's self-choice, it's levels children can achieve. They've got to work through the levels themselves. So it's very autonomous, which in turn does really motivate them a lot often when they do these. So if you head over there to do that, that'd be well worth doing. You can see the website there. So if you go to the P Umbrella Library at the top of the page, that's it. If you click on the P Umbrella Library, and then if you scroll down to keep going to free resources, and then underneath it says activities, self-guided progressions, and posters. So back up, free resources, and then click that. That's the one. And then on here, you should see, if you scroll down, all of these here. So I've got PE home challenges, multi-station carousels, if you just a lot of these, if you keep going down, you'll see there's a lot of orienteering ones, the cone mapping, team building, orienteering, and if you keep scrolling down, self-guided progressions here. So these kind of posters and PDFs have got individual levels and challenges, team building, orienteering, and if you keep scrolling. So if you simply click on any one of these, it takes you to the PDF of that particular progression activity. Now, they weren't, of course, all designed during COVID-19. These would have been on here, some of them for a while. But some of them do lend themselves really nicely to what we're doing right now. So they could work and be nice suggestion for things to do. And then you can just download that straight to your computer and print it off. And they can choose a level, start level 1, work their way through at their own pace, which is often nice.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Ryan, for
I like that.
putting that in our.
And then just to add to that as well, which we've had more chats around this area recently due to the COVID-19, but the podcast itself, on the P Umbrella podcast, which I release a weekly episode, we're on to episode 162 now. Certainly in the past 6 weeks or so, the majority of the guests that come onto the show, we talk about all things primary PE, share top tips, advice, class management, favourite warm-ups. It's all there. Worst lesson experiences, but more recently we've touched upon COVID-19 and what can we do about that and what we're going to do from home. So just again dipping in and out of that might well provide some, as I call them, knowledge bombs for people to take away with them.
Yeah. No, thank you. They look brilliant, and that's certainly, I think, something I'm going to be going through this afternoon, looking out and trying to grab what I can.
I'd certainly recommend the podcasts. I must admit, prior to COVID-19, I spent a heck of a lot of time on the road, and Ryan's podcasts were my go-to. So every time I would drive, I would listen to a podcast. I'd get out at the motorway service station, grab myself a coffee, and make the notes from everything I'd taken away from each podcast. He calls them knowledge bombs. I call them pearls of wisdom. He's got people from all over the UK, from teaching backgrounds, coaching backgrounds, all over, from Australia, from the States, from UAE. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous resource for CPD, Ryan. So thanks for sharing that one.
Well, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it, and long may it continue.
Well done, Ryan. Yeah. Funny, podcasts. I never listened to a podcast before the before lockdown and the COVID. And I listen to them all the time now. They're fantastic, aren't they? Brilliant.
Yeah. They're amazing. It's a surefire way to get some learning done, even when you're doing something else. Subconsciously, you are doing the garden, you are washing up, cleaning the kitchen. You could be out for a walk, and you're learning so much as you're doing that you can take away and apply into our profession, even if that podcast isn't education based. I've never listened to one of my own back. I can't bear the sound of my own voice, but you learn so much, and then you find ways to apply that to your life and to your area of work, and out of that is growth and striving forward, and it's wonderful.
And it's you've moved away, haven't you, in terms of originally they were for PE and physical activity and sport, but I've heard quite a few podcasts recently that focus on mindfulness.
So I mean, it's fascinating how the podcast sort of grew. A lot of the episodes are interviews with me and practitioners from around the world, and there's a few episodes sprinkled in of my own reflections from teaching and books I've read and how I've spun that to relate to my work. And there's also resource episodes. But you're right, Bryn. Recently, for example, I had Susan Hartley on from Yogini's Yoga, and the entire episode was just talking about more of the well-being of students, particularly when we go back, and taking care of that and being more mindful and present as adults and as children, and how we can filter what comes into our minds by taking that moment to be present and finding that space. I read a book over Christmas period, I don't know if any of you have, called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. It's absolutely fascinating. It's truly fascinating, talking about how we can create almost realistic memories, and our brains can't tell the difference between reality and a thought up memory. If we think of something so powerfully using senses, taste, smell, and experience, our brain can't decipher that if it was a real experience that we had, and how we can construct these calm places in our mind. So if anything ever gets too much for us and we get too stressed, we teach and we train ourselves to be able to flick a switch and be in that place to ground ourselves and be more present. And my mind was blown reading this book, and it was written probably over 40, 50 years ago, but it's also powerful. I'd highly recommend it to anybody. But I think we need to apply these things into everyday life, and children need to be able to do that and be more mindful and calm. Breathing exercises. I interviewed a practitioner called Jorge Rodriguez, and he does that with his children. He's based in the UAE. His children, between transitions in PE type activities, when they're fizzed up and they are excitable between activities, to calm them down, he has them simply breathing in and out, but drawing a square on the floor with their finger as they're doing it. So on their in breath, they draw to the right. On their down breath, they draw down. And in breath, they draw back along. And he's got them doing these really quirky and easy little activities, but it's so powerful, and it's great for transitioning that state. And I think now more than ever, we need to be looking out for these things to cater for the well-being of our kids coming back after this 11, 12 weeks off.
Can I just jump in? We've talked about the kids and what we're going to do, and that really is important. But have we got any tips for the well-being of teachers at all, and adults within the school? Because I think that's going to be important as well for this time. Things that they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say do what you can, which is you. I mean, I wouldn't say start anything new. You've got to have your own thing that makes you immensely happy and lights that fire inside you, if that's a hobby and you can physically do it still. You have to take that time and do it, quite simply. You can get too bogged down and too stressed, and if you're focusing on all of the negative and worrying, then that's all your brain's going to process, and that's how it's going to come back across from the way you interact with others. But just be mindful of that time and take that 30 minutes, half an hour a day to read that book you've been wanting to read, to go for that walk that you've started doing over lockdown, and you keep doing it. My dad, he's 63 years old now, and he was off for a while and started walking, and he was doing 1 mile a day. By the end, before I went back to work, he was doing like 7 miles a day, and he was devastated going back to work. And I said to him, you better keep this up. You need to do this for your physical and mental health. And I could see he was much happier because of it. And I would say that to anybody. If you've picked up a hobby you can continue over lockdown, or if it's something you've always enjoyed, you have to keep doing it to keep yourself in that happy place. And like I say, it is good for the soul, isn't it?
Yeah. What was the book again, Brian?
It's on my shelf next to me. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. Let me see if I can here. Oh, it's a bit too high up. I can't reach it, but it's brilliant. It's a phenomenal book. It's too high.
That one there. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's the one. And it's just a real eye opener. A real eye opener into the power of the brain and the mind, and it's sort of illuminated for me why sports stars do what they do to prep themselves for things. Formula One drivers put themselves in a position where they've driven the track so many times in their mind, it comes second nature when they drive it. When I interviewed Professor Damien Hughes on the podcast, who's a sports psychologist, he was talking about how we should be setting goals and visualizing more with children. When you visualize something and try to make it reality, your reticular activating system in your brain is looking for that. If you're looking to buy a new car, you'll see it all the time on the road because that's all you're thinking of, because it's always there. You'll see all of these Fords because you want to buy a Ford. And it's simply because your reticular activating system is filtering that information out. And I think it's powerful with children. I try and get where I can little elements of visualization in my lessons and have children close their eyes and replay their best moment from the lesson and visualize themselves doing said activity and said task. And it's such a powerful tool. And Professor Damien Hughes was saying that Michael Phelps, for example, would do that, sit himself in the back of the swimming pool, headphones on, and he'd just be running that swimming race over and over in his head. The taste, the smell, the feeling, everything. So it doesn't matter what happened in that pool. Nothing fazed him. He'd raced it 1,000 times before. And there's a lot to be said for that in education, I feel, particularly in physical education.
That's a useful tip. Thank you. Yeah.
We might have a few secondary teachers watching. I don't know if we will, but any tips for secondary teachers at all, especially with regards to PE?
It's going to be a tough one. My brother's a secondary teacher. He's a head of sixth form, but PE teacher. He's not going back properly yet, and when he does go, he's off in for 2 days a week for 2 hours a day. So I'm not quite sure how they're doing things. I've not read much in terms of what their physical education is going to look like, but again, like primary, I suspect they're going to be way off curriculum. I know secondaries are more usually sport-based than what primaries are. And the units when I've been in secondaries have often been football, rugby, whatever it may be. The one silver lining I do feel is this time of year, if the weather keeps being gorgeous like it is athletics is the one unit which you can achieve and be more isolated and distanced, because you've got your jumps, if you've got equipment cleaned and personalised, you've got throws you can do. You can even do running. That one lends itself gorgeously to where we are right now. In terms of others, your striking and fieldings and such, for now, I think we're just going to have to take a bit of a back seat and just see where the land lies in another month or so.
I agree with you there on that one, Ryan. And the other thing that's not been mentioned is dance.
Yeah.
In terms of, yes, it's not PE per se, but it's certainly it embodies the music. Look at him, he's moving and grooving.
Yes.
Any excuse for Graham.
Linking in the movement and the music as well, Ed, in terms of like get the children to create their own dance routines, the dance moves, choreograph stuff, and then share it with each other and then build on those ideas. We can easily do that, from a social distance, safe social distance. So many opportunities there. And the other thing in terms of like the art element and the slowing things down, one of the best tools I used when I was a teacher was a sketchbook. So each child had their own sketchbook and they could document their thoughts and their processes. And quite often during the playtime sessions, they would take themselves away, find a quiet place and sketch. So yes, there are times that we need to be physically active, but sometimes it's nice just to slow it down, calm it down. And if every child has their own sketchbook, it could be animation, it could be anything. It's their way of documenting their return back to normality.
Yeah. Thank you.
Go on, Abby, you were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, I just think dance is one that can be really easily accessed by everyone, especially teachers. Hopefully, want to also gain confidence in themselves, and it's also good to be done outside in the current circumstance that we're in. I feel like dance is a really good motivation point as well, especially maybe even yoga. Yoga can have so much importance delivered through it, especially by children's well-being being maintained really at good levels. So I would suggest maybe looking at dance and yoga to be delivered alongside if you are going to deliver anything else in the curriculum.
Yeah, can I just jump in as well and say, in terms of dance, it's an excellent copy me activity. It's great to give autonomy to the students, absolutely 100%, but it's a great copy me activity which can be done at a distance. On my YouTube channel, there's a video of me dancing in my garden from earlier this year. I had one of the best moments in teaching PE for about 4 years this year when I bit the bullet, got over myself and thought, I'm just going to do some dance. I'm going to learn a dance and I'm going to teach it. And what started as a warm-up activity as part of a lesson quickly turned into most of the year 6 cohort coming at lunchtimes to learn this dance, and then into a sports assembly and then a performance for the parents. I had never seen the buy-in from even the students you would least expect, because maybe they saw me push out of my comfort zone. But again, at these times when it's socially distanced, if you're outside, if you've got a good enough speaker, even in small bubbles in a hall space, learn a dance, do something together as a community, as a small group, and that buy-in is fantastic, and it's great exercise as well. So yeah,
is Dad dancing all right as well?
Yeah, 100%.
100%. Well, I'm going to say thank you for our guests, Abby, Ryan, and Bryn. That's been great. Some really good points there. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy your Sunday. Those schools who are going back next week, you have the support of everybody out there. The amount of teacher shaming and teacher bashing that went on in the past few weeks have been horrendous, but we know that we go into teaching for the right reasons. We want to have successful learners, confident individuals, and responsible citizens. And that's why we do it. We don't get into this profession to make money. We do it for reasons that, just ignore the flack out there. Concentrate on the positive and be kind, yeah?
Yeah, be kind. I like that, Bryn. Be kind.
Be kind, yeah.
Yeah, solidarity.
No. So, and for those people who want to rewatch this or catch it, yes, we'll make sure that this is available afterwards on the channel afterwards. So we'll share that through Twitter as well.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks,
See you.
Abby.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Ryan. Lovely work. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.